Hello, family. It's Wednesday and it's Refueling Your Faith. And today we're in Nehemiah. We find Nehemiah as a contemporary, as someone who was with Ezra. We talked about Ezra last week. Ezra basically built the temple back up. Well, Nehemiah is going to be rebuilding the wall. So in the first chapter of Nehemiah, we find that Nehemiah is the cupbearer for King Artaxerxes, and he finds out that the walls of Jerusalem have been destroyed, that they have been burned down, and he becomes very sad. And before the king, which is not what he's supposed to do, should be happy before the king, but the Lord gave him favor, and so he was sad before the king. The king asks why he is sad. He tells him he needs to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. The king not only gives him permission to do that, as well as letters to protect him so that he can go through other nations on his way to Jerusalem, but also gives him timber, allows him to connect with Asaph, who would have timber so that he can rebuild the wall. And so we find Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, and he has a variety of people who come alongside him to help him do that. We find in Nehemiah that there were many people, especially Sanballat and Tobiah, which we're going to talk about later, who were enemies of them building the wall back up. They were very unhappy that they were trying to find favor, or at least rebuild or bring back the Israelite community. And so they did a variety of things to discourage them. But what impressed me so much about Nehemiah is that he remained focused. And so in 52 days, in spite of all of the distractions, in spite of all of the discouragement that people around them were giving them, in 52 days, they were able to rebuild the wall. And once the walls were rebuilt, they began to celebrate. They began to confess their sins to God, just as in Ezra, just repenting of the fact that, hey, we are in this situation because we've been disobedient to you. And so, God, we want to recommit ourselves. And so they created a whole nother covenant, really not another covenant, but really recommitted to the covenant that God had already made with Moses. And so they recommitted, they celebrated. I really like, they had two choirs on each side of the walls, celebrating and rejoicing and thanking God for protecting them, for giving them the ability to rebuild the wall. And then at the very end, just as in Ezra, they recommitted. They were going to do tithing again. They were going to observe the Sabbath again. They were also going to not marry foreign women, or really people who did not have a relationship with God, so they were foreign. And so we find that the Israelite people are back in community with God at the end of Nehemiah, rejoicing because not only has the temple been built, but also the walls of Jerusalem had been built so they would be protected. And so today's highlighted scripture, as we said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit more about the opposition that Nehemiah and those who were building the wall faced. Let's look at Nehemiah 6 and 9. Nehemiah 6 and 9, it says, "For all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands." For all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. As I said before, as soon as Nehemiah got to Jerusalem, began to survey the wall and began to rebuild the wall, Sanballat and Tobiah, which were enemies who did not want them to do it. They found out about it and they were angry because the walls were being rebuilt. And they continued to ridicule and mock their rebuilding the wall. And so they went to the extent of going to fight them. They were going to actually go to Jerusalem and fight them, but God was able to, after Nehemiah prayed, was able to find out that they were going to come up against Jerusalem. And then as they were building, they kept their spears and their swords on them so they could fight if they were to come. But then the enemies began to find out that they knew about it, so they didn't even come and and fight them. And then they sent letters. Once the wall was halfway done, chapter 6, the walls were really already complete. They began to send letters to Nehemiah saying, hey, come talk to us. Come to the city of Oh no. Oh no, don't do it. But come to us and talk with us because we want to know a little bit more about you. Sent that about 4 times to Nehemiah. Nehemiah ignored it. No, I'm not coming. And so the last attempt, the 5th attempt, they sent a letter saying, hey, we heard that you're going to build this wall. Now, they're still slaves, even though the king allowed them to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild it. They're still slaves. And so they still have allegiance to the king who has power over them. And so they're saying to Nehemiah, hey, if you don't talk to us, we're going to go and talk to the king and let him know that you're actually rebuilding Jerusalem so that you can fight, so that you can rebel against the king. But Nehemiah still didn't pay attention to him. To them. He said, no, I'm not coming to talk to you. I'm going to build this wall. This is the call that God has placed on me to do, and you have nothing to do with it. And if you take time out to come talk to you, which you're just trying to kill me, take time out to talk to you, then I'm not going to be about the business that God has for me to do. Also, in chapter 6, we find that they had actually hired a prophet to tell Nehemiah to speak with them. And he again did not listen. God gave him revelation that was not true. And so what really amazes me about Nehemiah is, in spite of the intensity of opposition, the intensity of distraction, the intensity of trying to divert his attention away from what God would have him to do, he remained focused, and he did it by praying. Every time he heard of the ridicule, every time he heard of people, of them talking about him, he brought it to God and he says, help me. And even in this verse, he says, they are trying to frighten us. They're saying to themselves, they will become discouraged with the work and it will not be done. But now, oh God, you strengthen my hands. By your power, strengthen me so that I continue the work that you have for me. And so that is my word to you today. I don't know what God's plan for you today is. I don't know what he's telling you to do. I don't know what you're in the process of doing. And maybe the devil, maybe your own thoughts, maybe people have been sent to distract you and keep you from doing what God has called you to do. Well, I am admonishing you today, and I'm encouraging you today to pray to God to strengthen your hands, to help you to continue on the task that he has for you to do. And that could be your health. That could be remaining a good steward of your body and eating well, and not being around people who are going to cause you to go out to eat or something like that. Or maybe you're trying to have a healthy marriage, and there are people who are saying, hey, healthy marriages are not possible. And you're saying, well, no, it is. I've got to remain focused. Maybe you're trying to start a business. Maybe you are just trying to not be a frugal with your funds, not frugal, but use your funds inappropriately. Whatever it is, whether it's something that's going to affect a great number of people or something that's just something that God is saying for you to do, a personal goal. Remain focused. If God has given you the call, then he's going to protect you in it, and he's going to give you the strength. He's going to come up behind you. He's going to fasten himself to you so that you can remain strong when people are talking against you or are being negative or non-supportive of you. I love the scripture, Hebrews 10:39. It says, but we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith, which possesses our souls. And so that is Hebrews. And it's just, again, Christians are always, don't ever get it twisted, are always going to face opposition. When we're trying to be something that's against what the world wants us to be, when we're trying to be kind, when others say that we should be unkind, when we're trying to forgive those who have done things against us that are unforgivable, and yet we are being called to forgive. It's just going to be opposition against us. And so we have to be of the mindset that we don't shrink back, that we stand strong. And it's not in our own strength. I love the verses that we are strengthened. And that word says we are fastened upon us. God fast strengthen us, come behind us. And so it's not our strength, it's God's strength that comes upon us if we allow him to give us strength. If we focus on him, then he will strengthen us. But if we get distracted and start looking at those who are opposing us, those who are not supporting us, those who are ridiculing us or mocking us or talking about us, then we will not receive his strength. But when we focus on God, then we will be strengthened by the power that only he can give. And so even as we're celebrating today, Martin Luther King's, or remembering Martin Luther King and his assassination, his ability to remain strong. He had a call on his life to remind us of the moral principle of equality. And he remained faithful to that call in spite of all of the opposition that he experienced. And although he was assassinated, his dream continues on. And so my prayer for you today is that you would pray that God would strengthen you, that you would not focus on your opposition, but that you would focus on God, who will give you his strength so that you can continue the work that he has called you to do. I hope you are blessed today by this message. I'm praying for you. You pray for me. God bless.